Hello everyone. This is day 3 of chapter Force. In our last class, we have discussed effects of force on mass, direction, change in shape and size of an object with examples. Today we will discuss force of friction and its types, which includes rolling friction, sliding friction and static friction. Firstly, we will discuss what is a force of friction. Students, this topic is given on page number 35 and 36. Before going to start friction, let's consider an example. Roll a ball on the ground. You observe that ball moves some distance and then stops. Students, why does a ball stop? Yes, it is due to force of friction, which acts in opposite direction. So, what is friction? Friction is an opposing force which comes into play whenever there is relative motion between two bodies. Let's read the topic. Friction and opposing force. Friction refers to the ever-present resistance to motion. What is resistance? Resistance is hindrance to the motion that occurs whenever two materials or media are in contact with each other. So, friction is a contact force which acts in opposite direction to the motion of an object. This resistance occurs for all types of media. We know that there are three medias: solids, liquids and gases, and is characterized as the force of friction. And symbol of force of friction is small f. We have up to now generally ignored all kinds of friction, including air resistance, in examples and problems for simplicity. In our last classes, we have discussed what is a force and effects of force, in which we have discussed many examples, but we haven't discussed the force of friction in that examples. But now we will discuss force of resistance in all examples. Now that you know how to describe motion, we are ready to consider situations that are more realistic, in that the effect of friction are included. What is the definition of friction? Friction is defined as the opposing force, which I have already explained, which comes into play whenever there is relative motion between two bodies. In this example, there is a contact between ground and ball. That is why it stops after some time. Next, we will discuss what is the cause of friction. We know that friction occurs when two bodies are in contact with each other. We consider the example of wooden block and wooden table. When the surface of these two objects come in contact with each other, then what happens? It opposes the motion of the block. Why does it happen? When seen under microscope, every surface has small ridges and valleys. This is a hill and this is a valley. The cause of friction is the interlocking of two surfaces and it opposes the motion of one object over another. Next, we will discuss what are the main types of friction. There are two types of friction: dry or external or contact friction. Second is internal or wet friction. In this chapter, we will discuss only dry or external friction. It is divided into two types: static and dynamic. Dynamic friction is also known as kinetic friction. It is further divided into sliding and rolling friction. These are the main types: sliding friction, static friction, fluid friction, and rolling friction. We will discuss all these types in detail. First type is static friction. Static means body is at rest. Static friction is the opposing or resisting force between two solid surfaces. Resisting means which resist the motion, means to stop the motion. In this example, a boy pushes a box. This initial pull needs lot of effort. This is because the frictional force acting between the lower surface of the box and the floor, that is not letting the box to change its motion. So, box remains at rest. Static friction holds an object in its place. That is, it prevents to change state of rest of any object. Let's read the topic from book. Dry or external or contact friction. It is a friction which comes into play when one solid body moves over the other. It is of following types: static friction, friction which comes into play before a body begins to move or slide over another. That means when a boy is applying force on the box, it does not move. When he applies more force, then box start moving. So the initial force which resists the motion of the object, that is static friction. It has the greatest possible value for all frictions because it is the starting point of any motion. Kinetic or dynamic friction. Kinetic means in motion. This friction comes into play when there is actual relative motion between two bodies. Means when two bodies are in contact with each other and one body moves over another. And it is further of two types. First is sliding friction and second is rolling friction. Firstly, we will do sliding friction. Another name for sliding friction is kinetic friction. Kinetic friction occurs when there is relative motion at the interface of the surfaces in contact. Means when two surfaces are in contact with each other. In pushing on the decks, you eventually get it sliding. But there is still a great deal of resistance between the deck's legs and the floor kinetic friction. This is another example of sliding friction. Next is rolling friction. We know that skating is easier than sliding our foot on the ground. These rollers also have some friction, and the friction that these rollers create with the ground is the rolling friction. So what is rolling friction? It is a resistive force, where the word resistive means that stops an object, and it also slows down a body. Let's read the topic from book. Rolling friction occurs when one surface rotates as it moves over another surface, but does not slip or slide at the point or area of contact. Rolling friction such as occurs between a train wheel and a rail is attributed to small local deformations in the contact region, where the word deformations means change in actual shape. This type of friction is somewhat difficult to analyze because in this type of friction, speed of the object is more than the static friction and sliding friction. Next, we will discuss questions related to this topic. First question is define friction. What do you mean by static friction? What is sliding friction? Give examples. This is all about today's topic. Revise this topic thoroughly. Stay home, stay safe.